All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Veterans Day, and we are privileged to have with us author and journalist who has a great new book out, Dead Men Risen, an epic story of war and heroism in Afghanistan. Toby Harnden is here. Hello, Toby.
Hi, Steve. Good to be with you.
Well, thank you for being here on Veterans Day especially. You had tremendous access to our troops, NATO troops, American troops in Afghanistan. You were in the trenches with them, and you have what really is a sad story in many respects. It's a great story because you talk about these brave men and women who, and here's the sad part, you say how they were, overextended, under-equipped in many instances, and of course the horrors of war surrounding them, yet they persevere. But I'm disturbed by the description of them being overextended and under-equipped, and of course having to deal with the rules of engagement as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what struck me when I got out there. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting to find, but this was the summer of 2009. It was just as the US Marines arrived in Helmand, and the British were holding the line, really, with very limited numbers. As you said, they were overextended. There weren't enough helicopters, and the Welsh Guards battle group was right in the thick of things. And their battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Rupert Thorneloe, who'd been a friend of mine, was killed. He'd been the first battalion commander killed in action in the British Army since 1982, the Falklands War. They also lost a company commander, a platoon commander, and many others. So it really was a bloody, desperate fight.
Now, one of the things that we don't focus on enough, and this is Veterans Day, Toby, and I know you do talk about this, and it's how all this, the horrors of war, that these brave men and women volunteer to sign up for and serve and protect our freedom and our country and our interests. But it leads to a post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and so many of these veterans are coming home, and they bring a lot of that war and that horror back with them, don't they?
Absolutely. And again, I've been embedded extensively with American and British troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. I served, not in combat, but I served in the Royal Navy myself for nearly 10 years. But I guess until 2009, I was, somewhat of a skeptic about PTSD. What really is it? Is it just an excuse for people to, just, I don't know, want a free lunch? And I wasn't convinced that it was something that was real. But there were soldiers I met there. I mean, two in particular. There was Lance Sergeant Dan Collins, who extraordinarily brave in Helmand. He was shot in his body armor, knocked off his feet, huge bruise to his back. He was twice blown off his feet by IEDs and really sort of fought ferociously. He came back. I interviewed him when he was sort of, flying high when he arrived back, and then I interviewed him when he was in the depths of depression and deep PTSD several months later. And he took his own life. He hung himself in a quarry in Wales on New Year's Day in 2012. Another guy, I remember interviewing him in Helmand just as the unit was about to leave, called Warrant Officer John Williams. And I was thinking, this guy's living the dream. He was a veteran of the Falklands War, he was in his 50s, who'd also served a combat tour in Helmand and again been in the thick of the fighting. And very, very rare individual. There were only 3 in the Welsh Guards who'd served in both wars. He got back to the UK. He'd seen some terrible things in the Falklands. He'd seen his friends and comrades sort of burnt to death on a troop ship that was hit by Argentine bombs in front of his eyes. He never had any problems. But when he got back from Helmand, he'd seen dead children and dying children and other civilian casualties out there. He began to have nightmares. He hit the bottle, and he ended up, his wife told me, just drinking himself to death. Oh. And that was all about the horrors of war and the invisible wounds that he'd suffered.
Yeah, terrible. And Toby, very briefly, because we have less than a minute, we're leaving Afghanistan. We're just inviting more trouble the way we did in Iraq, are we not?
Well, British and American troops have now left Helmand, and they've handed over to the Afghan forces, police and army, and we've all read about the problems that they've had, and certainly documented in intimate detail in the book. So I think it's a very, very dangerous moment, and there's a feeling within the British military that this is a political timetable rather than a military plan that's leading to us leaving at this point.
All right, well, folks, there's the book on the screen, Dead Men Risen, and it's by Toby Harnden, and great book, and thanks for coming on. Also winner of the Orwell Book Prize. Congratulations on that, Toby.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
All right, thank you. All right, folks, up next, the Executive Director of For America on this Veterans Day, David Pozell on Newsmax Television.